of all, for all my seniors, I think there's like 4 or 5 of you here, and for other members of the community, thank you for coming. I want to thank John too, because John actually helped me figure this out. You know, there's always the man behind the scenes. Thank you. Welcome, school committee. Welcome, members of the school department. Thank you for coming. As I was saying earlier, I did try and, as you all know, who did show up, I went to all the classes and really encouraged people to come to this. This was like an important meeting that I told everybody they need to come to. My name is Lena. I am the director here of the Council on Aging. And like I always like to say, it's not about the schools or the kids. It's not about the seniors and the senior center. It is about the community. Where do we want to put our resources? Every community has limited resources. What is best for the community? And so when John came to me and said, let's do this, I said, let's do it. I'm sorry it never got in my newsletter because we'd already done that. But you know, as we grow, as you grow, Allison, Emily, who I work very close with, Josepha, who's also on my Council on Aging board, and also on this. Do you sleep? We are grateful to have you come here. Thank you for joining us. And for everyone in the audience, thank you for coming and finding out more, because it's only through understanding where we want to go with this that you can make informed decisions. So thank you.
Okay.
Do you want to use the mic or you just want to talk?
I can you hear me?
See, I'm worried about cable.
Usually people tell me to pipe down, so it's not usually an issue. Good morning, I'm Carol Lewis and I'm the chairman of the school committee, and you are at an official school committee meeting. We do have a quorum, and so we will be opening this meeting up as an official meeting. All of our meetings are public, so if you find that this is interesting to you, I invite you to come to any and all of our school committee meetings. As I said, they're open to the public, and the schools are really at the core of this community, so we're excited to have you here today. So with that, I am going to open up this meeting. Today is Thursday, April 12th, and we start this meeting by letting you all know that this meeting is being recorded, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have one agenda item for this morning's meeting, and that is the elementary school project. And I'm going to turn the meeting right away over to our superintendent, Emily Parks, who has a presentation for all of us, and then we'll have time for questions. We do like these sessions to be interactive when we're talking about the school building project, so we encourage public participation.
All right, thank you so much, Carol, and thanks for being here. We really appreciate your giving your attention to this issue. So our plan for today is for me to just sort of walk us through a brief presentation to make sure that the community understands what our needs are right now in the school department, and tell you a little bit about where we are in this process and what the next steps are, and to take any questions that you may have. We want to do our best to answer questions from the community. If we know the answers, we will answer the question. If we don't know the answers, that's good information for us also, because then we know what we need to be thinking about. So I'm hoping that everyone in the room has some familiarity with the fact that we have a potential building project happening in the schools. We sent a letter to all residents of Westwood back in December, I think, just to sort of introduce the issue to the community. And then since then, we've been making the rounds to meetings like this, just to engage people as best we can in what will be an important community decision. So I'll tell you a few things about the project. I think I don't need to tell the residents of Westwood, but I'll say it anyway, that Westwood is a community that is known for its school district, for the quality of its schools. As I'm out and about in town, people tell me all the time that the schools were one of the reasons that they moved to Westwood. We have a need right now. We have 5 elementary schools in Westwood. 3 of them are quite old. So the Deerfield Elementary, the Hanlon Elementary, which used to be called Pine Hill, those folks who've been around for a bit, and the Sheehan Elementary were all built between 1948 and 1953. And so we have some challenges with the physical plant of these buildings right now. And in addition, because they were built and designed in a particular era when education looked a particular way, we're finding that some of the things that we want to do in terms of teaching and learning in 2018 aren't supported by the facilities that we have. So those are sort of the two issues that we're thinking about. So we're in a process right now where recently we took steps to see if we could engage with the state to get some money, some funding, to help us to address our building needs. And so we submitted an application to a group called the Massachusetts School Building Authority. Their mission is to provide funding to local communities for school building projects. It is a competitive grant program, so you have to demonstrate that you have a need to get the funding, but it is paid for by us, by citizens. So whenever you buy something in Massachusetts, a tiny fraction of your sales tax goes into this fund. And there is then a process for local communities to get some of that money back. One of the things that I'm saying to people is we have an opportunity here in Westwood to get a piece of that pie right now. And frankly, if we don't take that opportunity, the money will go to someone else, right? So we're doing our best to see if we can get our piece of that funding back. We got very, very good news in December, and that is that our application was accepted. And so we are now in a process where we are eligible to receive this funding for a building project. And we were very excited because we got invited into this process on our first try, which is actually quite unusual. So there were 82 communities that applied, 15 were accepted, we were one of 15. And when we were at the meeting at the state, what we heard from other communities that had been accepted, things like, we've applied 7 years in a row, we're finally getting in. So we feel very fortunate to have this opportunity right now. It's great news. On the other hand, the fact that we were accepted on our first try, I think also indicates that the need is high, right? That we kind of got moved to the top of the list. But we have this exciting opportunity right now to start moving forward in this process, a process that probably will take 6 to 10 years ultimately to do this building project. So let me just tell you a little bit about our school so that people understand the need. So the Deerfield School here was built in 1953. Sort of a fun fact, it was originally built as a bomb shelter. We needed more space in the mid-90s, and so we put on a modular addition. We added a couple of classrooms in 1995. Those classrooms were intended to relieve some space needs. They were supposed to be temporary, but here we are in 2018. I think they're not temporary at this point. Deerfield is about 35,000 square feet. And then down the street on Gay Street is the Paul Hanlon School, formerly Pine Hill. It was built in 1951. Hanlon also has had a modular addition, so we added some classrooms in 2004. It's about the same size as Deerfield, a little bit smaller. What's interesting about the Hanlon School is that it sits on 36 acres of school department land. So there's an interesting opportunity there when we start thinking about what we might do to solve some of our building needs. And then finally, the William Sheehan School, which is over on Pond Street. It was built in 1948. It is the smallest and the largest of our elementary schools. We put an addition on the Sheehan School in the 60s. We still refer to that as the new wing of the Sheehan School. It sits on about 4¼ acres. tours. At the beginning of March, on a Saturday and a Sunday, we held open houses of all of these schools, and we invited the public to come in and take a look at the facilities firsthand. And that was a good learning experience for us. I think it was informative for the people who took the tours, who maybe have driven by the Sheehan School, which is a beautiful school on the outside. I mean, it's, you know, stately and beautiful. But I think it was educational to get inside and take a look at the interior. And then we also learned too, because we really had the opportunity to talk with people who went on the tours and hear their questions. It was a good process. And I want to share with you some of the things that came out in that process. So fundamentally, our issue right now is that we're just dealing with aging systems in these buildings. They're 70-some years old. And I really want to emphasize that we work very hard at maintaining our facilities in the school department. We certainly feel a sense of stewardship for the buildings. It's important to us to maintain them and to invest in those buildings. And I think if you went to our schools, you know, we like to say old but clean, right? The floors are shiny, we're taking good care of them. But the fact is that some of the systems are just failing because systems only last so long, right? We know if you have a house with a roof, you have to replace it sometimes, despite your best efforts. And that's where we are. So the roof on the Hanlon School needs to be replaced. It would cost $1 million to replace the roof on the Hanlon School. And so we're faced with choices about whether or not to continue to invest that kind of money in buildings where the interior systems are also failing. So for example, this photo here is one of the pipes at Hanlon. It's a little hard to see, but this is what we're faced with. The pipes are literally disintegrating, and we kind of keep patching them up. We tried to get a major plumbing project done at the Hanlon School a couple years ago. Nobody would bid the project because the systems are so old. Plumbers are saying, we don't work on this kind of stuff. Here you can, it's hard to see, but the window in a classroom at the Sheehan School, the note on the window says, do not open, because a lot of the windows don't really open and shut properly. Our HVAC systems, we have been replacing boilers, but again, we're faced with the issue of should we invest in another boiler? And we're, on a day-to-day basis, I think the way kids experience that is, it could be really hot in one classroom, and then you move next door and it's really cold. We have trouble keeping the temperature correct. So our systems are old and inefficient. When the classrooms get just up to 90 degrees, in some of our buildings, we've had to install air conditioning units that run in the winter, which clearly is not energy efficient. So we want to see what we can do about things like that. This is a picture of the Sheehan School. This door here is to the main office of the building. This is an example of how elementary schools that were built at a particular time kind of don't reflect the realities that we're dealing with today. So this is the main office. To get into the Sheehan School, the main entrance, you go down this hall, turn right, go down a set of stairs, and you're at the main entrance. When you enter the Sheehan School, you're literally on a landing, and you can either go down a set of stairs towards some classrooms, or you can come up a set of stairs, turn the corner, up to the office. And when the people from the state, from the MSBA, came out and looked at our schools, one of the first things that they said to us was, there's no sight line from the main office to the entrance. And that poses a problem in terms of safety and security. That's not how elementary schools, sadly, are built today. So we're starting to think about those kinds of issues. Classroom sizes, and this is a lot of words here, I'll tell you the gist. There is sort of an industry standard for how big elementary classrooms are today. And the size of those classrooms reflects what we're doing with kids, that we want to do, for instance, inquiry-based, hands-on science. There's a lot of equipment. We want kids to get out and really be able to engage with materials. Our kids aren't really instructed sitting in rows all day. We have different centers. Kids are in groups. So typically, elementary classrooms are between 950 and 1,300 square feet. In the Sheehan School, for example, 90% of our classrooms are smaller than that standard. It's really a tight fit in terms of the kinds of teaching and learning we're trying to do. The majority of Hanlon's classrooms are also a little below that standard. So that's an example of how the space sort of relates to the function of the building and how it's perhaps not maximizing opportunities for us. So this is an example. This is a 4th grade classroom up on the 3rd floor of the Sheehan School. And it's just kind of a small space compared to what modern classrooms look like. The other interesting thing is that you'll see here, this classroom doesn't really have any cabinetry or shelves or any place that you could put your materials. There's a lot of stuff in elementary classrooms now. So this isn't how elementary classrooms are typically built. It's just an example of a classroom that was built more recently, not in Westwood, right? You can see the cabinetry and sort of the size of the space. This is the art classroom at the Deerfield School. We find that a lot of the programs that we do now, the buildings also just weren't designed and built to support the kinds of programming we do with kids. So it's hard to tell, but this is a tiny little room. It was not intended to be a classroom. This room was actually built as a locker room originally, and we've converted it into an art classroom. You can see the vantage point here, we're looking down. That's because this little room was tucked in. You have to go down a staircase to get to this art classroom. Our buildings are not ADA compliant. That's another concern for us, that we aren't able to really meet the needs of all of our kids in some of these spaces. So it's tight in here. This is a photograph of an elementary art classroom from a school in Burlington that was built a year or so ago. I mean, the picture just speaks for itself, right? You can see the kind of space that it is. You can see here we've got sinks all along here where you can wash out your paintbrushes and wash your hands and all those things that we know we need to do. This is the library at the Deerfield School. It's another example of how we have a building that did not have a library when it was built. And so we've taken what was supposed to be a classroom space and converted it into a library. So it's small, and you can see we're doing things like the stacks have kind of been built up, which isn't, in elementary schools, you want the books low, right? So the kids can see the books. And then all of this stuff in here, it looks messy, but there's a method to the madness. We're really thinking a lot about what the function of libraries are in schools in 2018. And libraries in schools are becoming learning labs and maker spaces. So they're about the books still, but about a lot of other things. And our librarians are trying to pilot that kind of teaching and learning. So you can see these are all the materials that Mrs. Crass, who was our fantastic librarian at Deerfield, is using with kids on these different projects, and there's just no space for them. This is a photograph of an elementary school library in Andover that was built in the last couple of years. And again, I don't have to point out to you that that's a wonderful space that they have in Andover. This is an example of sort of what the corridors look like in that same school in Andover. You can see sort of these wide open spaces. We're using our corridors differently in Westwood. So this is a hallway at the Sheehan Elementary School. One of the things that's different about elementary schools now, as opposed to when these buildings were built, is that we provide a lot of services to kids in small groups, a lot of sort of intervention pull-out services. So we have literacy specialists and math specialists who work with small groups of kids to try to give each kid what he or she needs at that moment. And we don't have breakout spaces, sort of smaller spaces within the school to do those services. So we do things like this. We've set up this space here in a hallway, and that's where a teacher would be working with kids. We have storage needs. Most of our storage closets or custodial closets at this point have been converted to offices. And so this cart right here, this cart is where we store our Chromebooks, our laptops for kids, but there isn't room in those small classrooms to store them, so we store things in the hallways. You can't see it on the picture, but there's a student bathroom over here. This is the 3rd floor of the Sheehan. There's no hot water on the 3rd floor of the Sheehan, so this is the hallway at the Deerfield Elementary School. Sort of same thing. You can see we're doing breakout spaces. in the hallway with kids. I do like to point out, you can see the nice shiny floors, right? We're taking care of the place, but has to do with what we. This is in the Sheehan school. This is an example of how we're taking space and we're trying to maximize how we use it. So this is a teacher workspace where they can print things, and you see paper cutters and office supplies here. Because we've converted a lot of our storage into offices, we're storing our literacy materials for kids in here, but then we also have created a little space where the math specialists work with students. So that's kind of the overview, and the takeaway message is that right now we're in this process of figuring out how we can make fiscally responsible decisions to address our needs, to figure out what to do with these aging systems, to make sure that our buildings are ADA compliant, and to turn them into modern learning spaces. So that's the process that we're in, and that brings us to this moment, that we have this opportunity, as I mentioned, to engage with the state in getting funding for our project. If we were to get the funding from the MSBA, from the state organization, we would be eligible to be reimbursed for up to about a third of the total cost of the project. So it could be tens of millions of dollars. It's a tremendous opportunity. We have a long history in Westwood of addressing our school building needs using this process, engaging with the state. So we have this fantastic high school facility that opened in 2005. And that project, the program was a little different then, but that project was funded in collaboration with the state. That was a fantastic opportunity. In those days, we got 59% of the project reimbursed by the state, which was astounding. And unfortunately, that program is forever over. It's about 33% now. We also went through a similar process in the early 2000s to fully renovate the Martha Jones Elementary School and the Downey Elementary School. So we've taken care of those needs for a long time. And now we're trying to figure out how to go forward here. So the MSBA, if you want to work with them in terms of getting this money, has a very prescribed process. We've been invited into what they call the eligibility phase. And so the eligibility phase is this 9-month period, and there are things that we have to do during the eligibility phase, basically to demonstrate to them that as a community, we have the will to do this project, that it's something that we're willing to do. And so kind of the big deliverable is that during the eligibility phase, by the end of the eligibility phase, the community needs to have gotten the funding to go forward with the next step, which is called the feasibility study. So there is a school committee warrant article at town meeting this spring to approve borrowing in an amount that's not to exceed $1.75 million to fund the feasibility study. So the feasibility study is this process where we then start to work with architects, we hire a project manager, and we would engage in a long community process where we start talking about what we value in terms of our schools, what we want to go forward, look at all the possible solutions to address our needs, sort of a funnel. You talk about all the different possibilities, and then you whittle it down until we have our preferred solution, and we say, this is the project we actually want to go forward with. And at that point, the school committee would have to come back to the residents and say, here's what we kind of all decided, and this is what the project would cost, and there would be another vote at that point at town meeting about whether or not to approve the project to go forward.
There would also be a referendum.
Sorry, yes, that's actually very clarifying. So it would be a referendum, right? It would be a debt exclusion. This is years in the future if we continue down this road, right? So the one question right now is whether or not to approve the borrowing for the feasibility study. That is the only way forward with the state. So if we don't, as a community, say we're going to go through with this feasibility study, we are turning down the opportunity with the state to get the project partially funded in the future. So that's the point of decision that we're at this point. If the community votes the feasibility study, and the project ultimately does go forward, the money for the feasibility study is also eligible for that reimbursement from the state. So we could get up to a third of that paid back if we go forward ultimately. We hope very much that the feasibility study won't actually cost this much money. The school committee did some work a couple of years ago. We did what's called a master planning study, and a lot of the work that we had an architect do then can be used for this feasibility study process. So we're hoping to keep the costs. I think I have said this. So one of the things that we're trying to get out there is that we've made no decisions about what the project ultimately will be. Every possibility is still on the table. The only way to get to that conversation as a community is to do the feasibility study. That's when we start talking about, are we renovating all the schools? Are we building a new school? Are we consolidating from 5 to 4? Who knows? And that's what the feasibility study is for, is to figure out all of those things. Okay. So we've set up a website that's all about our school building project. I can tell you the school committee is very, very committed to making sure that we engage residents in this process, that all along the way we communicate well about it, and that we hear from people about what is important to you as decisions are made. That is it.
I have a question.
Thank you, Emily. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Just a question. How many votes do you need to get approval for the feasibility study?
Good question. So this is a borrowing article. Borrowing requires a 2/3 vote at town meeting. So that's a pretty high bar. Oh, and something I forgot to say, a very important thing, which is that if we vote to do this feasibility study, the borrowing, taxes will not go up. The town would be able to fund the feasibility study paying back the borrowing within its debt service. So people would not feel an impact from the borrowing due to the feasibility study. We're not talking about overrides, nothing like that. But it requires a 2/3 vote. And as we all know, town meeting decisions is based on who shows up, right? That moment.
Should we also mention the town meeting date?
The town meeting date, in case you have not gotten this word, has been changed. It's May 30th. May 30th at the high school gym.
Thank you for that presentation. One question I had was, assuming the feasibility warrant gets approved at this spring's town meeting, later on down the road, do you anticipate another vote coming up for the design portion of that? And if so, do you have a sense for how much that would cost?
So this is the design portion. The feasibility study
Is the same as the design?
It is the design, so thank you for asking that. So by the end of the feasibility study, which could be up to 30 months, we would have a schematic design for the preferred option to move forward. So it's the feasibility study funds everything short of starting to construct the project. Yeah.
So it would take up to 6 to 10 years to get this project done?
So by the time of school actually was opened up or renovated, so
Those kids are in school now, would have kids in school.
yeah, not like that. And that actually, yes, that's a good point. One of the things that I'm talking about when I talk with parents, because I'm talking to elementary parents, and they can do the math. They're saying, well, my kid won't be at elementary school. They won't get to go to this nice new school, which is, true. And so we're having this interesting conversation about stewardship, about how do communities get these kinds of things done, and that what the project we're talking about right now is it's a 50-year investment, right? This is a big decision to make as a community. And I've said to some of those elementary parents, you're right, your kids won't get to go to this elementary school, but good news, they're going to go to a gorgeous high school that some other people paid for, right? And this is kind of the way it works. It works in communities. Yeah. So I hope 6 years. Fingers crossed. That's my hope.
I know there's a concern in the neighborhood that people have spoken to me about, as the building of these condos, and with the condos with no children, that they will have a vote in this, and they can't see why they should, possibility of going up in their taxes. For what? They don't have any children. So they, the fear is that they could mobilize and shoot down the projects. I know there are homeowners that the children are in school or have gone to the schools here. They want to protect the neighborhood and the school system, but they're afraid of these condos being built, especially down in Islington, and it could disrupt everything. It's a concern, and there's several people I've spoken to. This is a serious issue for them.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I can say that I think that we all agree that the quality of the school system affects the quality of life in town, regardless of one's age or whether or not you have kids in the school. So I think if you look at the school districts that are the shining examples that we all like to look at, and the towns that they exist in, that, you know, we move to those towns because of the quality of the town, which is greatly influenced by the quality of the school district.
I'm one of those people who has no children. I've lived in this town for 40-some years at this point. I've also been a school teacher, and I volunteer at Martha Jones at this point. But if you don't educate your children, whether they're yours or the neighbors or 20 years down the line, we're losing a whole bunch of generations who can do much, not just for Westwood, but perhaps for the state, perhaps for the country, perhaps for the world. Education is the most important thing that you can do for children. And if you don't do it the right way, it's a loss of a whole bunch of generations.
First, I came in about a minute late, so you're the superintendent, you're finance, you're the rest of the school committee?
Assistant superintendent, workers.
Oh, okay. You know, you're asking for money and you're asking for loans and funding. Have you thought about like saving energy from these buildings? Like there are ways to measure the energy performance of the building, and when you do a renovation, which looks like you're going to have a lot of it, you measure the savings from the completed conservation measure, and then you budget that back into these projects. And have you thought about doing those kinds of things, and how do you do that?
Yeah. So Pete, maybe you could talk about some of the things. So we thought about that, for instance, when we built the high school. So.
Right. So as part of this process, though, the percentage is based on things also, like you can get added percentage for energy efficiency. So when you're building a building, let's say with this project, the more efficient the building is, the higher the percentage is.
The reimbursement percentage.
Reimbursement percentage that you get back from the state when you're building these things.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Sure. In town, we actually have an energy manager in town that helps us with all our buildings. And what he does is, we have projects like changing lights out, changing lights at high school, changing lights out at the middle school. Our HVAC systems at the down at Martha Jones are a focus of energy efficiency. So we are looking at all our buildings, and we put solar on last year, the year before. So yeah, we're definitely taking steps to do that.
So that's something that we're thinking about, how to make our current buildings more energy efficient and to track those energy savings. But what Heath is also referring to is that the percentage of reimbursement that the state provides to a community for a building project, they incentivize designs that lead to energy efficient buildings, and they give you more reimbursement if you design those kinds of energy efficient buildings.
What I'm asking is, do you actually know the energy savings when you do an energy conservation measure if you have a building, do you actually know when it's breaking down? Because you could be wasting money when the building breaks down.
Yes.
For example, and do you know it, or does it happen, or do you find out when people start to complain about it? So, I mean, there's a way to actually measure the whole building energy performance and to measure the energy savings and budget that into, this is a big part. You need more than just borrowing and asking the community. You need to have a budget, where I save this much money because I have efficient systems and they all work. And that money I can use as we go along in the project to help pay for it. It's a way to save money and energy. Do you do that?
Yeah. So for instance, right now, we just installed solar panels on our buildings. And one of the things that we're trying to get a handle on, and I have to acknowledge that we're only a year into the solar panels, and so we're still trying to get a handle on this, is what is the savings in terms of our utility budget that's coming out of those kinds of measures, like putting on the solar panels. And we're looking at that's part of our operating budget. So, can we budget less to cover utilities going forward because of the savings that we realize now? And I think what I'm hearing you say is there then a way to sort of earmark that savings towards this kind of project?
Yeah, that's true, but also solar, it saves money at the site, but it doesn't save energy. In fact, it could even cause more energy use because you look outside and say, oh, I don't have to turn off the lights because I'm getting free power. But I'm talking about like saving energy and the money associated with systems that break down, because they're always breaking down. And by measuring the whole building energy performance, you track how a system performs. And that's what I'm asking you to do. There are tools that do that. In fact, about 10 years ago, the EPA came here and they created a database that consists of a model for every school building and every municipal building in the town. And you're actually tracking the whole energy performance to get a score on the building. And I know the DPW building, the Bobby Street building, that was really the only good building in the town.
Is that the work Tom Philbin does?
Yes.
Yeah, we work with Tom Philbin around that, just what you're talking
But
about.
he doesn't do that though.
As part of the
He
green.
doesn't?
He doesn't do the energy, whole building energy. He does other things like light.
Maybe we could talk after that, because I'd be interested in learning more.
I think it would be a good idea.
Okay.
This is another way to get money and without asking for it.
Yeah, good. Yeah, we'll have to talk to you. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Emily. It was an excellent presentation. I've had 3 children who have attended the Westwood Public Schools, and they're excellent, and I encourage this process to move forward. I'm just curious, how does a feasibility study work if it's something that the town decides, who decides to work on it, or how do you choose to work on a feasibility study?
So the MSBA process is that the community forms what's called the school building committee, and they have particular roles that have to exist. So somebody from the school committee, somebody from the selectmen, and community members. And so that group has a role to play in terms of sort of shepherding the project forward. In terms of decision making about what the preferred design is, the school committee needs to engage the community in basically a big ongoing community conversation. And what we imagine is that we would be having a series of meetings to hear from people about, what's important. Is it really important that we have 5 neighborhood schools? Things like that. And from that process to develop a set of criteria that we could use to then work with the architect and say, well, here are different options. This is the option that seems to best meet the community needs and the community desires. And ultimately, the school committee has to make a decision about what project goes forward.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions. One, if the building is this old, like the one built in 40-something, they weren't interested in, saving, conserving energy or anything. What are you gonna do? tear the building down or just cut it and start over or?
That's the choice to be made, right? So, you know, and this may be what this gentleman's getting at, you know, that, yes, the buildings in 1948 were not built with the same kinds of efficiencies or technologies that exist today. And so it may be more cost efficient and energy efficient to say, well, let's just start from scratch and build a new building.
It probably
As-
costs less if you did that.
It may cost less, and Josefa, you can remind us with the high school, I think we faced a similar.
Well, I think when we looked at the high school, I know I was on the board at that time, and the reason I voted for a new high school is when they came to do their presentation, they told us it was gonna cost $1 million more to build a new school than to renovate the school that we already had. And that was without opening any walls or knowing what the problems were that they couldn't see. So to me, it was a no-brainer. That project ended up, the project cost $44 million. However, we got 59 cents back on the dollar. So it cost us, I mean, that was the best bargain, I think, in the state. When you look back on it, at the time, we didn't think so, but right now we look at what we have and we're very happy.
My second question is, do you have as many children now as you had in the 60s, or do you have more, or do you have less? Because I know a lot of people, you know, when the kids grow up, they take their kids and they move, you know?
Yeah. So I just say I don't know how many kids were at the schools in the 60s. I don't know. But I can tell you that we have the same number of kids in the district today that we had 10 years ago. So the number in the district has stayed the same. Now, what does happen is where the kids are in the district shifts around. And so right now, we have a lot of kids at the middle school and the high school, whereas 10 years ago, sort of the bubble was back in the elementary school. And that does happen, right, as housing, houses turn over, right? People's families grow up, they leave, somebody else comes in. Those are cyclical. Part of what happens in that feasibility study, part of what you get for your money, is that people who understand these things come in and they take a look at those kinds of demographic trends and they make projections for us about what we're going to need out into the future. So when we built that high school, the current high school, there are only about 600 and some kids in the high school. And as part of that study, the architect said you need to build for 1,000. It's going to get as high as 1,000. Well, here we are today, nearly how many years later? I don't know. 14, thank you. And there's 1,021 kids in the high school, and it's supposed to go up to 1,047, and then it's going to start going down. So pretty good in terms of prediction. So that's part of that sense of we're making an investment, and we need to make sure our money is going to take care of our needs. You don't want to overspend, right? But you're trying to hit that mark.
This is a little different. I have a friend that sold her house in Marblehead and decided she was going to go to a community that didn't have a good school department. And that's where she moved for her. And then all of a sudden, people started moving in and it went up, so it doesn't matter when you move. Taxes are going to go up.
What happens if the unfortunate decision is made that feasibility study isn't passed?
Yeah, well, that's such a good question. What happens indeed? So I need to be clear that we have needs that have to be addressed in those buildings, and doing nothing is not one of our options, right? I mean, we are going to have to, if we don't choose to address the Hanlon roof, for example, through some kind of building project, then we will have a day where we have to replace it. I mean, that's just the way it goes. And so that doesn't seem like a good financial decision. The option at that point would be to wait a few years. Maybe we could reapply with the state and see if we could get it again. That seems foolish to me. Like, we've got a bird in hand right now. It's a risky proposition to try to get into this process with the state. Or, frankly, if you don't find funding elsewhere, then you have to fund the whole thing locally going forward, right? That's kind of the option. And sometimes I'm asked, are there other opportunities for funding for schools? This is kind of the only show in town, yeah.
You'd have to have a lot of bake sales.
A lot of bake sales, a lot of cookies, a lot of cookies, yes.
What And what other paths are you taking to get this level of communication out there? Because,
Yeah.
there's 20 people here, 20 people at other meetings.
Right.
But how are we going to hit the larger audience? Because, I'm a mother, my kids are at the Sheehan. The heat there is nasty, and even though they're going to be gone, you worry about future generations. And honestly, 100% of the people I talk to that move here is just for the schools. I grew up in Needham, and I lived in Dedham. My baby was 6 months old. We came here because of the schools. And it's critical that we have a good environment for these kids to learn. As the retired teacher said, it's the #1 thing we can do for our kids. So how can we help, and what else are you guys doing to get this message out there?
I'll talk a little about what we're doing, then maybe we could talk about how you could help. We love that question. So, for the last 2 months, we've been going to all the PTO meetings. Tonight, this is our second community forum. We'll do a third one tonight. We sent a letter to all residents. The community forums have been filmed by Westwood Media Center. We've got that posted. We've given tours of the building. We, every 6 weeks since the beginning of the year, have been doing what we're calling dispatches to the local media. So we've been doing articles for the local newspapers. We're going out to Fox Hill. We're just trying to kind of take any opportunity we can to speak with people. We've got a website posted. We've been using social media. We're trying to really get the word out.
We're making Emily a household word.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
My goal is to have people tired of hearing me talk about the building project. So we've been doing that. But I think you're right? As much as we're trying to get the word out, we do need people to sit up and pay attention and be part of the process.
Right, so it's people like you. You are, folks like you obviously are very interested and concerned about the community, care about the community. So we implore upon you to be the ambassadors for these projects. If what you've heard today, if you have questions, you know that you can ask any of us. If you're talking to folks in the community, we encourage you to bring this subject matter up and to refer them to the resources that are out there, to ask you questions or to have them come to us. So that's why when we have these forums, we're excited to see you all here, because it shows that yes, there is interest, but not everybody can get here. And a lot, this is a small town. Word gets out, and so we need you to help us get the word out. And we've been fortunate that folks have shown up at our other forums and have shown a willingness to do just that. So we're hoping you have that willingness as well. Does anyone on the committee want to say
I
something?
think the school committee is taking, many of the members are going to be taking our responsibility to get the vote out. Those of you who have been to a town meeting, a 2/3 vote is very hard to get on anything. So we really need a lot of people to show up, and a lot of people are going to have to help organize. Call your friends, tell them about this. The question is, what if it doesn't go through? What will happen? Well, we're going to give up possibly, a third of the state money. It could be a $60 million large school, $20 million we're kissing off. We'll never get. We still have to do the roofs. The engineering study that was done for us before, in the 3 schools they evaluated, they mentioned in the reports 15 times we're non-compliant with code. Okay, that has to be changed. Electrical systems don't work. That has to be done. Poor condition, original equipment in the 1940s and 50s. That has to be. There's a lot of money that is going to have to be spent when you're non-compliant with code. It's unsafe. As Emily said, we're doing a ton of work already just to maintain what we have. The other thing is, as a town, we're very proud of our recent a new senior center, a new library, a new police station, a new fire station, a new high school. At the school committee, we like to look at other towns that we compete with on MCAS scores. How well are we doing? Have any of them built elementary schools in the last few years? Belmont, Dover, Sherburne, Needham have all built brand new elementary schools in the last 15 years. Duxbury and Weston have built 2 brand new elementary schools. Concord, Carlisle, 3 new elementary schools in the last 15 years. Winchester, 3. In Lexington, 4 new elementary schools. Okay, so we're proud of what we have built, but if anything on the list has been short-shifted, I'd say it's the elementary schools. Now, if you've seen the pictures, our teachers are courageous, our administrators, to make it work. And the teachers want to come here because of the system. But it's, so, A, we're going to try to help organize get out the vote, to express how important this is. But each of you that are here today, if you could get 10 people to show up, because it's important, because we're gonna pay now or pay later. It's just that if we can do this study, we can get a lot of support from the state, or we'll have to do it on our own, bit by bit, one code after code. It's gonna cost probably, as Josepha has said, a lot more than it would have been if we had got the state support to do it. So we do need, those of you who feel strongly about this, to talk to your friends, get them to show up, and we're gonna ask many, many more people to help us do that, because that's, 2/3 vote is a very, very hard thing to get.
And it's especially difficult too, I think Emily pointed this out, where it doesn't impact any of us directly, right? I mean, none of us in the room will have kids in those elementary schools. So we have to look at this is our legacy to this town. We all love this town, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be here. And so this is something that has to be done, and we need the support of the town for the future of this town. Other points, Tony?
I just want to say, communication is key. I'm a project manager. You've got to get the word out, especially to the people who are naysayers and think it's going to drive up their taxes. All the very important facts that you just made and you guys made, it has to be put in front of people. So whether it's in the Westwood paper every day or every week or on the front page, you guys have to get more word out there and stronger words. And not like a long thing people don't want to read. Put it in large print if you can, but something that shows the facts that you're going to ultimately end up paying more if you do it piecemeal than you do it right the first time to get the feasibility study done.
Nobody said it bluntly yet, but if you need to somehow get it out in a way that's polite, and what may not be polite, but the fact is property values depend on the schools.
That's right.
When I moved here in 1984, my oldest was ready to start kindergarten. We could have had the same size house and the same privacy, maybe a smaller lot, in Norwood. Okay, so we spent an extra, 55 or 60,000 to be here. It's a whole lot cheaper than sending him to a prep school.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, if our schools get to be equal to, if the school population gets to be equal to the Norwood school population and facilities, all that, we're looking at losing 25% of the property value.
Yeah. That's right.
That's a lot of money to most people in this town.
Great point. Any other points or questions, concerns? No? Anyone? Okay.
I mean, the only other thing I'll say, if you have ideas, I mean, we're always looking for ideas on communication, so we don't have all the answers.
Right.
We're trying to do the best we can. So if you have an idea, just let one of us know.
Let us know.
Yeah.
We always feel like we're like throwing the communication out there, and then it's surprising sometimes.
I mean, I could just say for like busy moms and stuff, we look at the front page of the newspaper that comes, and that's what we see. We don't have time to go through the whole thing, so anything you can get put right in people's face, whether it's a flyer but it's important to outline these very important facts about losing, real estate equity and, costing more, if you're doing things piecemeal, like get those points out there in bullets, rather than a whole long article. Get the important pieces up front. Because that's what's going to stick in people's minds, just like emails, right? They say people sometimes just read the subject line and that's it. So, maybe we need some more catchy marketing stuff to catch the attention of voters.
One suggestion I have, based on spending a lot of years coaching youth sports in town, is possibly showing up on soccer games on Saturdays or lacrosse games on Sundays and just meeting with the elementary school parents who are standing on the sideline. They're a captive audience. They really are not going anywhere for at least an hour and a half. So that might be one
That's a
suggestion.
great idea. That's a great idea. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you for coming out today. We really appreciate it in these busy times, and for listening and for your input and so forth. And we hope we will see you at town meeting, and you will implore upon others to join.
And if you have any questions.
If you have any questions, certainly reach out to any of the school committee members. Our contact information is on the district's website. Also, feel free to reach out to Emily. And that's it. So at this point, I think we'll make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And second, all right. I think we're all in favor. And we will let everybody go.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.